discussion before we break for coffee. The subject for the next discussion is building a culture of peace, engaging youth and schools, UNESCO perspective. I would like to invite Venerable Grog Sigamani to be the moderator of this panel, and Her Excellency Katalin, the President of the General Council UNESCO, will nominate the representatives to participate as the panelists.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Thank you very much. We are very much looking forward to our next panel. I was very grateful to my colleagues yesterday, and we were able to hear the ambassadors from Oman, Senegal, Nigeria, the Netherlands, Sudan, and Madagascar. And as you remember, during our interactions, perfect, just perfect timing. Perfect timing, Master Chinkung. Welcome. The Venerable Chandi Matero, dear friends, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. I just was thanking my fellow ambassadors of yesterday who have shared their views. These were the ambassadors of Oman, Senegal, Nigeria, the Netherlands, Sudan, Madagascar. This afternoon, we will have the ambassadors from Serbia, and I would like you to come to the stage. Benin, please come to the stage. Croatia, Nicaragua, Montenegro, Norway, and Macedonia. Yesterday was an occasion of learning for all of us. From their excellencies, the ambassadors, we learned of the different ways that countries promote interfaith dialogue between the diverse segments of their society as a way to nurture harmonious coexistence and avoid the emergence of conflicts. We also learned from many examples that interfaith dialogue has an intrinsic value as a great facilitator in intercultural dialogue. For me, the central theme in all the interventions was, so far, the meaning and importance of education. It was noted by almost all that deliberate policies and actions of the government to open up channels of communication for interfaith dialogue, because it's really necessary to achieve durable peace. Central amongst them are the education policies that involve teaching about the diversity of religions and reinforce culture of peace and tolerance. So, ladies and gentlemen, now we are continuing the sharing of the experiences and the different examples from different parts of the world. So first, I would like to ask my dear friend, the ambassador of Serbia, to share her views with you. Thank you.
Good day, good people. That is how I wanted to begin my addressing to you today. First of all, let me thank you, ladies and gentlemen, to the government of Sri Lanka for its warm hospitality and for the opportunity to visit this beautiful country and get more acquainted, more familiar with its very rich and beautiful culture. Secondly, I would like to thank to our dear colleague, Ambassador Katalin Bogyay, for inviting all of us, her colleagues, to take part in this very important and very interesting conference. The last but not the least, I'm really honored to be again in your company, Venerable Master Chin, and to share with you enthusiasm about this very important and very significant conference. I'm addressing to you today not only as the Serbian ambassador to UNESCO, and let me say a few words. Serbia is a small European country that used to be the part of former Yugoslavia, and Serbia is multi-ethnical and multicultural country and multi-confessional country, but with the predominance of the Orthodox Christians. But I'm addressing to you today also as a philosopher and university professor, lecturing communication theories, public opinion theories as well, and as a person who is professionally profoundly dedicated to the humanistic values of peace and dialogue. First of all, let me emphasize the fact that UNESCO is the UN agency for education, culture, science, and communication. And even though having no direct or explicit relations to the religious matters or to the religion themselves, UNESCO is deeply dedicated and deeply dealing with the topics that are very close to the major values that many, if not all, religions are based upon. For example, peaceful cooperation and creating better environment for living together. It seems that the most important term that we are discussing is actually the category of difference, which is the cornerstone of modern humanism, the category that all descriptions and taxonomies are based upon. The question is how we should deal with differences and how should we act accordingly. The modern term of tolerance is one of the answers, but this term is very complex, and in the contemporary world, which is dramatically divided, dramatically polarized, the political correctness of tolerance sometimes only covers up the existing animosity, hostility, and hatred towards differences. In the political sense of the word, to be tolerant towards different others means nothing but accepting them as marginal, as inferior. Let me remind you, tolerance presumes the relation between two subjects, which means that one subject ought to be tolerant while the other should be tolerated. For that reason, we must say, we must recognize that tolerant subject is in fact the powerful one. On the other hand, to be tolerant could mean that we are not truly interested in others, that we are in fact indifferent towards them. That is why the education for peace should be based not only on tolerating differences, but on the learning how to cherish them and how to love the differences. And that is exactly the very principle and the very purpose of UNESCO. UNESCO is celebrating, encouraging, and favoring differences. Within World Heritage and many other programs, UNESCO is treating differences as the supreme value, believing that the cultural diversity is actually the power that is enriching our world. Ladies and gentlemen, I deeply believe that there is no peace without love and respect for differences. And the point in which UNESCO actually meets your noble initiative, Venerable Master Chin, is, that's my opinion, hope. But hope should be understood today as the acronym in which H stands for humanism, or for harmony, as you said. O for opportunity or optimism. P for philanthropy or peace. And E could stand for the enthusiasm in education. For all those reasons, I'm really glad to enhance, to endorse all the propositions made by my distinguished colleague from Nigeria yesterday. And I would like to thank you, Master Chin, for your important mission, hoping that all of us, UNESCO on one side and you on the other, will be able to achieve those noble goals. Thank you all.
Wonderful. We are already energized. So it's a great start for an afternoon session. It's always dangerous. Bravo. It's always dangerous to speak after lunch. I remember once, it was many years ago, it was in Hungary when the so-called Visegrad countries' presidents met. So 4 presidents from 4 countries. And it was a live television program. And we had a concert, and we were hoping to show the faces of the presidents, but they were all sleeping. So we couldn't have one cut from the audience. We were just showing the musicians. So that was a wonderful start. Thank you so much. And now I would like to welcome my dear friend, the Ambassador of Benin, to share his views. He is going to speak in French, so we would like to ask our dear friend that translating his thoughts. Thank you very much. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Merci, Madame, ma chère Présidente.
Thank you, Madame President.
Je voudrais, en bonne tradition africaine, d'abord saluer les plus anciens ici, ce qu'on appelle les vénérables vieillards dans notre tradition. C'est toute religion confondue, en commençant par le vénérable Chin. Je voudrais aussi remercier et dire un mot particulier à la présidente de la conférence générale et dire qu'il n'y a pas de hasard dans la vie. Ce n'est pas du tout par hasard que cette conférence se tient sous sa présidence. C'est que son cœur, la pureté de son cœur et ses intentions ont dû coïncider avec le fait que cette conférence se tient en ce moment-ci. Et je suis convaincu que même après sa présidence, il continuera de faire le bon travail qu'il a toujours fait. Et nous sommes là pour la soutenir. Mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, je crois que ce qui nous réunit tous ici, c'est que nous savons que notre humanité se détériore et que l'humanité a besoin à ce moment-ci d'un sursaut. Un sursaut. D'où la pertinence d'organisations comme l'UNESCO et la nécessité de forums comme celui que nous tenons aujourd'hui. Pour sortir de cette situation de crise générale, notre humanité a besoin de ce que le premier président du Sénégal, M. Senghor, a appelé un supplément d'âme. Un supplément d'âme. Et pour cela, je crois que nous avons besoin pour nos dialogues, ou ce qu'on appelait même nos polylogues, nous avons besoin que ces dialogues soient plus inclusifs, le plus inclusif possible. Voilà. Inclusif géographiquement, religieusement et culturellement. Alors, les grands absents, selon mon expérience, les grands absents de ce mouvement œcuménique, de ces grandes réunions, sont les traditions religieuses dont les textes ne relèvent pas de l'écriture. Quand on a des grandes réunions comme celle-ci, les traditions religieuses qui ne sont pas des religions du livre sont souvent absentes. Pourtant, ces traditions religieuses existent en Afrique, en Amérique précolombienne, en Océanie, et même des poches existent un peu partout dans le monde. Je crois qu'il y a deux raisons pour lesquelles elles sont généralement absentes. La première est que les parties invitantes, c'est-à-dire les personnalités qui organisent ces forums, appartiennent aux religions du livre en général. La deuxième raison aussi, il me semble, est que ces religions ne posent pas à l'humanité des problèmes de violence et de terrorisme en ce moment. La plupart de ceux qui nous posent des problèmes de violence aujourd'hui dans le monde contemporain au nom des religions évoquent les religions du livre. À tort peut-être, mais souvent, c'est les gens qui se basent sur les religions du livre évoquent les textes des livres pour revendiquer leur violence. Alors, c'est donc un peu au nom des religions qui ne sont pas du livre que je voudrais parler aujourd'hui pour être plus inclusif et évoquer à leur propos un problème qui nous est commun à tous, le problème de la traduction. Évidemment, le problème de la traduction est très important parce qu'il conditionne nos perceptions mutuelles et notre compréhension les uns des autres. Évidemment, je vais donner des exemples de ce que je connais le mieux en Afrique et en Afrique occidentale surtout. Alors, je voudrais d'abord dire quelques mots sur la présence des religions dites animistes en Afrique. Mes collègues africains, mes compatriotes qui ont parlé hier, ont traduit la nature de ces religions, mais ont aussi donné quelques statistiques. Alors, ces statistiques sont réelles, sont vraies, mais il faudrait qu'on nous sachions que les statistiques sont une chose nouvelle en Afrique. Et que elles sont nécessaires, elles sont réelles, elles sont vraies, mais elles ne nous permettent pas d'appréhender tous les phénomènes religieux dans sa profondeur en Afrique. Parce qu'en général, les Africains ne se posent même pas la question de savoir de quelle religion je suis ou de quelle religion vous êtes. Ils vivent et perçoivent les autres et les laissent vivre de leur religion. Donc ils ne se posent même pas le problème de savoir qui est plus nombreux que qui. Un sociologue à qui on demandait, pour le cas de mon pays, le Bénin, quelles sont les religions, quelles sont les statistiques, a dit la chose suivante: il y a 49% de chrétiens, 51% de musulmans et 100% d'animistes. Évidemment, cela défie les mathématiques, mais c'est la réalité sociologique et religieuse que nous vivons, parce que même les chrétiens, même les musulmans sont un peu le fond d'animisme en eux, dans leur pratique, dans leur tolérance, dans leur vécu quotidien avec les autres religions. C'est ce qui explique que les conflits religieux sont relativement récents en Afrique. Et qu'il faut trouver leur cause ailleurs, leur cause profonde ailleurs que vraiment dans les religions. Cela explique aussi que lorsque les Africains, ces mêmes Africains se sont trouvés avec l'esclavage au-delà de l'Atlantique, ils ont pu créer des religions syncrétiques et vivre en harmonie avec leurs maîtres d'esclaves qui étaient chrétiens. Alors, je voudrais maintenant donner quelques illustrations des problèmes de la traduction. Lorsque une religion de l'écriture, comme le christianisme ou l'islam, surtout le christianisme dans le cas que je vais donner, et une religion de tradition orale se rencontrent, comment est-ce que se fait la rencontre et quels sont les problèmes de traduction que posent ces deux religions, que se posent ces deux religions. Évidemment, mon modèle de communication, c'est la théorie. Je prends deux modèles, un africain et un européen. Celui africain, c'est celui un proverbe de chez moi qui dit: une mauvaise traduction est toujours source d'incompréhension et de conflit. C'est-à-dire, si vous voulez apprendre la langue du voisin, apprenez-le jusqu'au fond. Le modèle européen, celui de la théorie de l'action communicative de Habermas, que nous connaissons tous, et je vous prie de le lire en anglais, à la page 136, je crois. La théorie de l'action communicative, page 136 de votre traduction en anglais, à partir de la troisième ligne, moreover. Vous lisez ça jusqu'à la fin.
Communicative action can continue undisturbed only as long as participants suppose that the validity claims they reciprocally raise are justified. The goal of coming to an understanding is to bring about an agreement that terminates in the intersubjective mutuality of reciprocal understanding, shared knowledge, mutual trust, and accord with one another. Agreement is based on recognition of the corresponding validity claims of comprehensibility, truthfulness, and rightness.
Alors, c'est sur cette base que je juge les traductions qui ont été faites en Afrique occidentale de la doctrine chrétienne dans les langues africaines depuis le XVIIe siècle. Alors, la doctrine chrétienne a été traduite, mais des concepts importants comme la foi, l'Esprit Saint, le péché, le Sauveur, enfer, n'ont pas été traduits dans les langues. Jésus, qui est quand même un concept important pour les chrétiens, a été assimilé à une divinité locale qui n'a pas du tout les attributs de Jésus, qui n'a pas les attributs, je vais vite, le concept de péché par exemple a été traduit par une pécadille, une offense. Une offense. Le péché originel a été traduit par une offense. Satan a été rendu par une divinité locale qui est la divinité justement des traducteurs, qui est le messager des hommes auprès de Dieu. Et Dieu le Père, ce qui est plus grave, a été traduit par une divinité qui est une femelle, une divine déesse. Ce que je voulais dire, c'est que l'essentiel du message chrétien n'a pas passé dans la traduction. Alors, j'en viens maintenant rapidement aux recommandations. sur la base de ces observations, c'est qu'il faut vraiment prendre la traduction au sérieux comme un préalable avant la constitution de tout modèle. Hier, le vénérable Chinkou nous a parlé des 3 vertus, et la première est qu'il faut éviter la confusion dans la religion. Donc c'est très important pour éviter la confusion. La deuxième proposition que je vais faire, c'est qu'il faut que nous constituions un espace mondial des textes des différentes traditions religieuses. Un espace mondial des textes des différentes traditions religieuses, avec un manuel de religion comparé à l'usage des écoles, où ces religions sont présentées dans leurs propres termes. Tout à l'heure, la dame qui a parlé en Australie a fait un peu la même proposition, qu'il faut très jeune apprendre aux enfants à avoir d'autres perspectives religieuses que la leur. La troisième proposition, c'est que il faut que, surtout à l'UNESCO, les sociétés de savoir soient aussi complétées par les sociétés de sagesse. Enfin, à mon avis, lorsque nous faisons des réunions comme celle-ci, il faut prêter plus d'attention à l'économie politique des religions, c'est-à-dire au fait que l'argent maintenant a été érigé en une divinité. Et c'est donc en cela que nous pouvons atteindre à ce que les Africains appellent Ubuntu, un concept qui est cher à madame, et que je suis parce que nous sommes, et c'est comme ça que nous pourrons avoir un vrai dialogue, vérité et réconciliation. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Excellency. What an amazing dimension we got into it, and I hope we can continue this problematic of religions as well. I would like to ask my very dear friends to try to stick to the 5 minutes so that we could also have a discussion, because I was told by many of you yesterday that it would have been nice also to have a chance to discuss a little bit or our thoughts. So now I would like to ask the Ambassador of Montenegro to share her thoughts with us.
Most Venerable Master Chinkung, dear Venerable Sirs, including Venerable Bogadama Chandimanayakatera, Madam President of UNESCO General Conference, Ambassador Katalin Bogyay, respected delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to start by saying that it is an honor and a great pleasure to be part of this UNESCO delegation composed of 25 ambassadors, privileged to find ourselves in Sri Lanka, a stronghold of the Buddhist religion and culture from ancient times, a nation where Buddhist teachings were first written down, and a truly beautiful and magnificent country which boasts a diverse range of cultures, languages, and religions. In the era when understanding the many contexts that shape expressions and religious identity and belief, especially cultural, historical, political, and economic, is one of the great challenges of interreligious and intercultural dialogue, this forum, committed to overcoming the crisis through education, is topical and adjusted to the moment. It goes hand in hand with UNESCO's profound commitment to bridging gaps in knowledge about other civilizations, cultures, and societies, laying the foundations for dialogue based on universally shared values and undertaking concrete activities inspired and driven by dialogue and translated in the area of education. Intercultural and interreligious dialogue is extremely important for my country, Montenegro, one of the republics of the former Yugoslavia, a country founding member of UNESCO and non-aligned movement dear to all of us, and a country that has to a significant extent been shaped by its ethnic, cultural, religious, and linguistic diversity. With no majority nation, and I do emphasize, a country which is as complex as being composed by more than 50 nations, where the largest nation, Montenegrin, represents 45% of the population, Serbian, 29, Bosniak and Muslim 14%, 7% of Albanians, and 3% of Croats, Italians, and others. And even though Orthodox Christianity is dominant form of religion, being at 72%, we have sizable adherents of Islam at the level of 19%, and then Catholic Christianity at the level of 4%, and lesser extent of presence of Protestantism, Judaism, and Buddhism. Being on crossroads of civilizations ruled by Illyrians and Romans, by Venetians and Ottomans, and most recently embroiled in the meltdown of the former Yugoslavia, Montenegro wears its wounds as medals rather than the scars. Why do I say so? Because Montenegro is the only out of 6 republics of the former Yugoslavia that managed to escape this tragedy of the dissolution, the tragedy of wars and genocide in former Yugoslavia, without having a war on its territory and without shedding blood of any of its ethnicities, any of representative of its religions. In Montenegro, we do love saying that ethnic and religious diversity is our historic feature and never a source of problem. There is a bit of truth in that, but also there's a lot of false self-appeasement. Why? Simply because challenges related to cultural diversity have a different connotation in the modern society. In society in which cultural diversity is standard characteristic, and standard doesn't necessarily mean desirable. In society where contemporary individual is doomed to living in the environment of neighbors having different skin color, speaking different language, devoted and praising a different God, or no God at all. In the area where cultural differences are more often a reason for alienation and distrust between people, despite the contemporary society ideal that cultural diversity and religious diversity is a treasure to be celebrated and proud of. As globalization and the emergence of new contemporary challenges and threats to humankind make the need of dialogue among peoples ever more important, cultural diversity imperatively requires development of an adequate policy, and education policy and dimension being the most important part of it. Education process should aim to prepare citizens living in multicultural and diverse globalized world. On the one hand, in order to imply respect for different ethnic and religious groups, and on the other hand, it has to provide equal opportunities for everyone, despite their origin, despite their gender, and beliefs in a given society. To combine these goals is not easy, but as long as we all understand that there is no room for preeminence or uniqueness of any religion or nation, and that our alleged differences bear the same foundations, whether we call them, and you will allow me, Most Venerable Master, to quote you, love, mercy, or compassion, that we are on the right path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. After Ambassador of Montenegro, we are still in Europe, and we are going now to another former Yugoslavia, to a country which used to be part of Yugoslavia, and that's Croatia. So I'm now asking my dear friend Alida Matkovic, the representative of Croatia, to share her views with us.
Thank you very much. First of all, allow me to express my thanks for the ability to be here, to the organizers, because I'm able now to exchange experience with some very esteemed personalities here, Master, the Venerable Madam Bogyay, and of course I would also like to express my gratitude to the government of Sri Lanka for having invited us here to encounter in a real intercultural dialogue by learning on the spot and profiting from your wonderful country. And allow me here to draw a some parallels between our two countries. Croatia might be somehow bigger in square kilometers, but in terms of their inhabitants, we are 5 times smaller. There is something in common which I have become very much aware. You have a lion on your flag, and we have 3 lions on our coat of arms. It was not until I came here that I started thinking the 3 lions are specifically an emblem of Dalmatia, which is a region of Croatia which is famous for the merchants. So being involved in the intercultural dialogue, I have started thinking that maybe deep down in the past there have some relationships, there have been established some relationships between the two countries. Religious-wise, we also have more or less, we have some common religions. The majority of people are Christians, and of course then the prevailing majority is Catholics, more than 80%. We are still waiting for the results of the latest census. Then would be the next religion is the Orthodox religion, but then the third would be the Muslims, and then Jewish, and then Roman Catholics, and so on. In our constitution, we are defined as a state of Croatian citizens, but also of 25 different national minorities, which is their name is stipulated in the constitution. Some of them, the 5 of them, come from the former Yugoslavia. Then the others are from the neighboring countries. Then there are Jewish, Romas, but then some very distant ones like the Russians, the Polish, and we are proud to have them in our constitution because they are seen as a richness. I would like to draw another parallel between Sri Lanka and Croatia. Both governments had to regain control of its own territory after violence. In Croatia, some of it was done by the armed forces, but there was the peaceful reintegration of the Croatian Danubian region, which was the eastern part of the country, which during the war years was living under the UN protectorate. When this news was announced in our country, it was a very big news. And I would say very few people believed that it would be a successful exercise. Of course, country officials appeared on TV, and then they had to explain what people thought it would be the most difficult things, like everybody thought it was impossible to reintegrate the police forces, because how on earth could it happen that somebody who was shooting at you, at one moment could make part of your own forces that are supposed to protect you. But thank God it did happen. It did happen because we didn't judge people, we judged only those who really committed crimes, and we enabled people to change their attitudes. There were some other questions which people thought that would maybe be difficult, but technical questions like how would we have to dial the international code to dial these cities. But very few people asked questions to our country officials about how education would be reintegrated. However, we do know that as education deals with identity, it is a very sensitive issue, and according not only to the Croatian experience but also to the UN officials talking to us later, it turned out to be really one of the most difficult issues for the reintegration. The main idea of the whole reintegration and of education was that we should preserve national identity, because it is when people become scared for their national identity, then conflict arises, and then after this is ensured, then we have to learn about other cultures in order to encounter intercultural dialogue. And with a lot of goodwill on both sides, with the help of the UN and some other international organizations, I can say now that it has been a successful exercise. There were some questions which were like more technical ones. Schools had to change the names into numbers because very often people tend to name schools about their national heroes, and you know that in times of conflicts, national heroes are maybe a disputed issue. Then children were put in different shifts, which at the time was a solution, but now, thank God, we have changed that because the time has passed and the majority of the wounds have healed. Then at that time we issued school certificates for the Serbian children in Cyrillic script and for some other. A lot of seminars on on tolerance and respect of the others were introduced, and we had to we have to thank the UN and a lot of NGOs, international NGOs, which came to our country and carried these out. What was also helpful was that we managed to develop a lot of teaching materials with the help of the international community, because you can imagine that at those times the financial resources were very scarce. So with our own brains, I would say, and the international money, we managed to do it. Which was a really difficult issue was the teaching of recent history, and we agreed that that teaching in this particular region would be banned for 5 years, because we all know that how our attitudes and knowledge change after a certain period of time, and this is not relevant only for conflicts, but it is relevant otherwise in the world. The rest of this reintegration was more or less easier, because it was based on the law on the teaching of national minorities, of the language of national minorities and script, which actually existed even before the conflict, but which we changed in a way that even those who do not belong to the national minority but who may belong to a majority nation would be entitled to follow such education. And this type of education about teaching on the culture, literature, language and history, this varies according to the number of students, because in some situation you have very few students, so you cannot have whole school. But in some situation you have schools. So today you have Jewish schools, you have Italian schools on the coast. There is a Serbian grammar school in Zagreb. So there is a variety, and there is a lot of cooperation with countries of origin, especially on the textbooks of smaller minorities, because we simply do not have enough money to print textbooks for few children in, let's say, Czech language. It costs money. I have to finish. Okay. Then just allow me to say a few things on our religious education, which exists in state schools. We have basically two types. One is religious education, because any child may opt either to have religious education of any type, which is carried out by the religious community, and then we have education of religions, which is happening mostly in secondary schools, and which allows for students to learn about different other religions. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, we go now from Europe to South America. And I would like very much to welcome my very dear colleague and friend, who is the head of the so-called electoral group 3, meaning symbolically he is representing this electoral group, but now he's going to share his views about his country. Thank you very much.
Oops. Sorry, I have a technical problem. Compañeras y compañeros, allow me to express my sincere gratitude for the government of Sri Lanka and the Ambassador Katalin, Bogyay, President of UNESCO General Conference. Nicaragua is a small country of 5.5 million inhabitants located in the middle of the Americas. Our population is made of mestizos, blacks, the Mezquitos, Sumos, and Ramas. These last three were original inhabitants of our Caribbean coast. Let me share with you our experience in developing our democracy. I would say how Nicaragua has been being able to consolidate peace and good governance. The military conflict we live in the decade of the 80s is far gone. Our democratic system is developing well, and since 1999 there has been democratic elections. The government of reconciliation and national unity of President Daniel Ortega has been able to improve education, health, and economic development, and our economy is in a good shape. I think there has been 4 practices that have made this possible and reflects the philosophy of the Nicaraguan government. In the first place, respect for the opinion of others, their political and social decision, and the dignity of the human being. Second, tolerance. Accepting that each one of us have the right to their own opinions and beliefs. Tolerance is not easy to reach, but if we learn to have tolerance, then we are able to respect the other. Third, solidarity. This means we care for the well-being of women, men, the youth. So the solidarity is our main inspiration and compromise to eradicate poverty and to get sustainable development. And finally, but not least, attitude of service. To seek at all times how we can serve and not being served by others. All these elements are equally important and has been the key of the success of the government of President Ortega. To finalize, I would like to share a personal experience with you all. From the wisdom of the Toltec, the original inhabitants of America, 1,000 years ago, they call it the Force Agreements and offer a powerful code of conduct that can rapidly transform our life to a new experience of freedom through happiness and love. These agreements are, in the first place, be impeccable with your word. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself and to gossip about others. Second, don't take anything personality. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say or do is a projection of their own reality, their own dreams. 3, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstanding, sadness, and drama. With just this agreement, you can completely transform your life. And finally, always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to sick and under any circumstances. Do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. Thank you for your patience and attention.
Thank you very much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we go back to Europe, and I would like very much to invite my friend who is coming, the so-called Western European Electoral Group 1 region, Norway, and of course he has a special relationship with this country. He used to live here, he has special experiences also here in Sri Lanka, but now I'm asking him to share his views and his country's contribution in intercultural dialogue. Thank you very much. Permanent Delegate of Norway.
Ayubowan, Bonekam, Venerable Master Chinkom, Venerable members of the Buddhist Sangha, religious leaders, ambassadors, and dear friends. Even though the topic here is peace, harmony, dialogue, I think we should remember that we are, after all, living in a world with less wars, less conflicts. Fewer people are living below the defined poverty line. But, on the other hand, the inequalities in the world is increasing, and that is not sustainable. When preparing for this introduction from my side, I thought I would focus on Norwegian as a country who has been involved in several peace processes, as you know, especially in Sri Lanka, and that's been one of the 20 peace processes Norway has been involved in. But then I thought, after being inspired by yesterday's lecture, that I would do something quite otherwise. And that is to do with what really shocked Norway in the last couple of years. On July the 22nd, 2011, Norway was hit in a way, as you could call a small-scale 9/11. A bomb blast close to the Prime Minister's office killed 8 people and caused huge damages. The bomb was larger than the one you had at the Banco Ceylon or in the Peta district 25 years ago. 1 hour later, the ruling party's youth camp was attacked. 69 young children and youth were killed cold-bloodedly, shot one by one within 2 hours. 77 people lost their lives and several were injured. All this was done by one who called himself an ethnic white Norwegian Christian, a man in his 30s. He was soon labeled a terrorist, and he had done this, in his own words, as a crusade against the influence and immigration in Europe of Muslims and Islamophobia. Just before doing these misdeeds, he had published on internet 1,500 pages justifying his actions in his, what I would call, weird virtual world, using and pasting from different obscure racist scholars. The hit was surprisingly to Norway. It was totally unbelievable. It was like getting science fictions down into our rooms when we saw it on televisions. Why am I repeating this tragedy, sad story? Because I think some of the responses we had in Norway to this action could be of mutual benefit in looking into and in discussing. What happened immediately? We raised some questions. First, we needed to know what happened. We saw on television that youths were killed. They tried to escape through swimming over a fjord. Someone died on their way. And how could this happen in a peaceful country like Norway? And why would this happen in what we saw as our peaceful society? And afterwards, we raised another question, which I think is even more important. How should we as a nation react to this misdeed? In the short term, the political parties united very strongly, saying that this is something we should be united against. The king and the prime minister met with the imams to ensure that this is nothing that is against Islam, Muslims in Norway. So this was a kind of a confidence building at the first week after the tragedy. And what I think is what's even more important is that the Norwegian people were mobilized. They were able to show their grief and their sorrow together under a banner of more hope, more love, and no cry for hatred, no cry for revenge, and no one raised the issue that we should reinforce death penalty in Norway for this misdeed. After a week, we had a huge parade in Oslo, the capital of Norway, where 100,000 people participated, and 100,000 people in Norway, in Oslo, is 1/5 of the population in Oslo. And it was an ocean of roses. That was how the Norwegian society reacted to this misdeed. On the intermediate term, how should we react? Of course, all schools were mobilized, because we knew that the children saw what happened on television, and they should have, together with their teachers, a possibility to digest, to understand, to learn what actually happened, that this was the work of one man. On the longer term, it was a legal process, of course. The person had to stand trial, and it was an open process. He was able to try to defend himself, but that, of course, was no one understood it. No one understood what had happened. But we had a very legal process. We also established an independent commission coming up a year after with their recommendations. And we are using education and the classrooms to counter this kind of misunderstanding and hatred towards other religions. The conclusions and lessons learned as a society in Norway is that even though this was a one man's work, the question we raised is, why was this not detected? Why did we not know that someone was crazy enough to do this? Where were the safety net in the Norwegian society? This is something we have to work on through the schools. We did not focus on more control, more intelligence, more control of internet, but we were focusing on schools to have a more profound knowledge of different religions for all Norwegian children, and we had a campaign against bullying in schools. So no child in Norwegian schools should be left out to be able to sit in his room using his computer and to make this kind of a plan to do this kind of disaster. What we have said and worked on, it's not easy and it's not perfect in no way, is to safeguard the Norwegian open democratic society with more dialogue based on humanism. Istuti, Nandri, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I give the floor to the last speaker of this session, First of all, I really would like to thank my colleagues being here and coming to Sri Lanka. I have to thank you, Most Venerable, that you invited me first, and I was given the chance to invite some ambassadors coming with me. I was looking for ambassadors whom I knew were sensitive enough, open enough towards each other, listening to each other, and sensitive enough and interested enough, of course, Master Ching Kung, Buddhism, intercultural dialogue, and interfaith dialogue. And of course, whom I believe are very much interested in this country. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for my fellow friends and ambassador coming, being positively integrated into this very interesting dialogue. And now I would like to give the floor to the ambassador of Macedonia to share his views and experiences with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Most Venerable Master Ching Kung, Venerables, Excellencies, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. It is a great honor and privilege to participate in the Interfaith Forum dedicated to overcoming crisis through education within the intercultural and interfaith peace dialogue, a topic of uttermost importance nowadays. I sincerely thank Venerable Master Ching Kung for the invitation and for his tireless efforts in building bridges of understanding between peoples through dialogue and education. If you allow me, I would approach the topic from three different angles: general, personal, religious, regional, and purely intimate, personal. Generally speaking, we are witnessing worldwide profound changes of unprecedented dynamics. The so-called globalization is bringing in many areas of the world rapid economic development, but also decline in standard of living in other areas. The immediate communication worldwide through internet and other modern means and technologies connects people and facilitates exchanges and development, but at the same time makes possible dissemination of ideologies of hatred and intolerance. Big-scale social transformations are going on with hundreds of millions of people moving from rural to urban areas. Whereas the quantity of goods and services in many domains is rising, the income differences are widening. The planet is being ruthlessly polluted and people are being exposed to a new, different environment. Moreover, all these profound changes happen within the lifespan of one generation, which result in an ideological and value system vacuum, since it's very difficult to acquire and establish real, long-lasting values when new generations are exposed to such rapid and, at the same time, profound changes. Hence, the importance of the traditional and long-lasting values the Venerable Master Ching Kung is insisting, which will bring and keep peace and understanding among people of different backgrounds and religions. Speaking from a personal religious regional point of view, I've been born Muslim in the Balkans, a disturbed region which produced the term Balkanization, meaning conflicts and divisions, which started at the beginning of the 20th century and ended with its conclusion. Unfortunately, and this is often the case, people emphasize the negative characteristic rather than positive ones. As an old saying goes, people are more fascinated with the turbulent ocean than with the calm waters. Very rarely, if never, you can hear someone speaking of the Balkans as the region where major religions and civilization meet, coexist and enrich each other. In the Balkans, and people tend to forget, because it was a long time ago when the region was not even considered as such and was not called Balkans, was born and flourished the ancient Greek civilization, which enriched the whole humanity. People ignore that while in the medieval age, in many areas of the world, religion divisions and different conflicts were taking place, the Balkans under the Ottoman Empire at its height were enjoying an unseen period of tolerance based on mutual respect, characteristic of the empire's tolerance towards people of the books, that is, towards Christians and Jews. It is in such tradition that I have been raised and educated in my hometown, Dibur, which is an example of peaceful coexistence between people of different ethnic and religious background, where everybody knows the language of the other, where everyone respects the tradition of the other. It is that tradition I would like to emphasize and keep in me, a tradition which enables me to understand and appreciate the Master's teaching on interfaith dialogue and the common values of different religions and beliefs. And finally, allow me to share with you, dear friends, my personal experience, intimately speaking. I met for the first time the Venerable Master Ching Kung and the wonderful people of Pure Land last May in Bangkok, where I was invited with other UNESCO ambassadors to a Buddhist gathering. In my age, I'm 55, man starts to ponder on the meaning of life. I consider myself lucky that mainly in this age I work in UNESCO and I have met the Venerable Master, whom I have the opportunity to listen on several occasions since. I was lucky because although I like reading very much, I would not have enough time, according to a Chinese saying, listening to a wise man for 2 hours is like reading 1,000 books. I repeat, I will not have enough time in my life to read so many books and learn as much as I have learned from him during this short period. As I said, I'm fully aware of the complexity of the world today. I come from a complex region. I have had my personal experience in life, complex in many ways. I am in an age which asks difficult questions as preparation for the inevitable end I've been told will come. Fortunately, I have found myself in UNESCO, among people from all over the world, among educated people and of different cultural backgrounds, people I appreciate and whose knowledge and experience means a lot to me. I consider myself lucky because the Master's teaching and the goodness and sincerity of Pure Land people make me a better person every day and have brought a calmness in my heart and cleanness in my mind. Thank you very much for everything, Master Ching Kung, and I wish you long life and good health to you and happiness to your devoted followers. Thank you.
I just felt that the ambassador of Macedonia had to speak at the end of this panel, because of course we have prepared this trip and we have shared our experiences, the way we met Master Ching Kung and the way we met sometimes the first time Buddhism. I would like to thank you, Most Venerable Chandi Matero, for Sri Lanka, for inviting us, for being here. We are now, of course, traveling, looking for UNESCO World Heritage Sites. We are very interested in your culture. And thank you very much for Master Ching Kung sharing your teaching with us. And thank you for my fellow ambassadors and friends being so open, so receptive, and so positive towards each other and towards this very, very special gathering. So thank you very much for the invitation.